If you ask children, name an animal, they end up naming African animals most of the time. I did as a child as well in Colombia. I knew very little about the beautiful ecology and reproductive biology of the armadillos at the time, but certainly elephants and giraffes all over the place. What's happening to them is that they are not adequately protected by our approach of protecting the priority ecoregions and making sure that those habitats are preserved, because they are taken one by one out of those ecosystems that are well protected and are well there, withstanding the impacts of human development. They're taken one by one all the way to the verge of extinction. So the approach has to be a different one for these guys than the umbrella approach that we do for natural packages in ecosystem conservation. This is really the main concern. Illegal killing for international trade is what is bringing these species that are so charismatic to the verge of extinction. And what if we lose the tigers? We're losing not just the species, we are losing the credibility of the environmental movement. Well, if we lose the tiger, if we can't even protect one of the most charismatic ones, and it's just one species, is the world going to believe in the environmental movement to tackle problems as big as climate change? So that's why I say species conservation, and these flagship species are the litmus test of the environmental movement. So there is much more at stake than just the species themselves. All right, short tour. This is Cameroon, the Congo Basin, the largest cohesive piece of tropical rainforest in the world. Amazing. What you don't see underneath is, of course, the fantastic forest elephants that live there. But what we don't see either is the slaughter happening underneath. Several patches of this forest are already devoid, not just of forest elephants, but of wildlife altogether, because it's very, very high bushmeat extraction, but also deliberate killing of forest elephants that have disappeared in the DRC, in the Dominican Republic, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is the largest, or used to be the largest stronghold for forest elephants in the world, with around 400,000 probably in the 70s. We have less than 10,000 of forest elephants left there today. Now, what's happening? Why are people killing these elephants? It's because ivory is ever so precious, and now demand for ivory in Asia is driving a tremendous poaching surge in Africa. And this is Christy Williams, the head of our Asian rhino and elephant program, holding an African elephant tusk here in Nepal, confiscated. So it's really going to Asia, that trade chain. Another story, a success story, rhinoceros. You know rhinoceros, the black rhino, the white rhino in Africa. Big success story. White rhinos were on the verge of extinction. At around 1890, there were about 100 white rhinos in the world, in South Africa. That was what was left of that population, which today numbers in the order of 20,000. So that is a conservation success, and not only attributed, of course, to WWF, but the whole efforts of the South African government at the time and other NGOs and so forth. And black rhinos, they went down big time, you may recall in the 60s and the 70s, from about 100,000 animals all the way to 2,500. And then numbers doubled since 1995 up to today to 4,880. So they are again on the recovery path, and we can say fantastic. Unless, of course, all of that conservation success is compromised by the poaching that we see today. And these are poaching numbers. It really started in 2008 and is now continuing to climb. Last year, 448 rhinos lost in South Africa alone. This year, that number may hit 600 or so, almost 2 rhinos a day. At that rate, and if it continues to increase, we may start seeing a decline in rhino numbers, actually, and a waste of the previous decades of great conservation success. So that worries us. What happened? Around 2007, a high-level official in Vietnam spread the rumor that rhino horn cures cancer. And that immediately ballooned into a tremendous demand for rhino horn in Vietnam. Some government officials at the Vietnamese embassy in South Africa were implicated in rhino trade and were actually arrested. But it continues. It is rampant, and South Africa, holding, of course, the largest number of rhinos in the world, in Africa, that is the country that is seeing these losses. Okay, that gives you a little bit of context. Tigers, of course, 3,200 or so tigers left in the wild. It means we can't afford to lose any tigers to illegal trade for their parts. And this tiger in particular was photographed in Chitwan National Park. It was tranquilized to be translocated to Bardia National Park in Nepal to start a new population of tigers. It was a very exciting, very moving moment. The animal was translocated and 2 months later was killed by poachers in Bardia. All right, so what do we do? I mean, combating poaching and illegal trade is such a difficult thing, but we have been doing this already for 50 years. And we continue to be at the cutting edge of approaches and technologies. And I want to give you a refresher of what that actually looks like. Of course, first and foremost, the rangers. They are there. They are the ones risking their lives. They're the ones actually doing the job. And we support them. We provide training. We provide equipment. We are there really to give them the best conditions for them to excel. Now, in Kaziranga National Park, this is in Assam, the province of Assam in India. This is the park. We have, of course, the issue of the Brahmaputra rising in levels, flooding Kaziranga at times, and the animals moving out of the park. This is where you need your buffer zones. This is where you need your corridors. And Karbi Anglong, this area here, has some patches of forest that can be used by elephants, by tigers, by rhinos. So they move across these corridors. And camera traps are a common way of documenting, are they actually using the corridors or not? Camera traps are very simple. I mean, this is a camera hidden here, attached to a tree. On the other side, you get a reflective surface, and there is either a laser beam or infrared beam going from one side to the other. When the animal crosses, it triggers the camera, and you get a photograph. The animal or anything else, I mean, of course, the corridors are being used by people all the time. So here are all the pictures during the day of people doing their own thing, their livelihoods, in the corridor areas that are used by people. And then at last, the picture that everyone was waiting for, are the tigers using the corridors? Yes, they are. And that was all very good. I was there in March this year at the Tiger Shareholder Group meeting. And it was exciting when after the meeting, all of a sudden, we met the team from the field, and they said, we have the best photograph ever. It happened last night. And this is the shot. Poachers. Poachers. 2 days later, they were apprehended. They could be identified, the village, somebody, informants, etc. They were arrested. So camera traps are becoming not just a scientific tool, but also an enforcement tool. And they have become now very sophisticated indeed. All right, then we have something other that is not technologically very demanding, but equally effective, informant networks. And this is the Wakar Chapagain. Last year, they arrested the most wanted illegal wildlife trader in Nepal. And this intelligence often leads to the apprehension of the poachers before they make the kill, which is really what we want to do. And then there is Cindy Harper from the University of Pretoria in South Africa, and she's a geneticist trained in veterinary medicine. She became a world leader in rhino forensics, in rhino DNA forensics. And she has a database of many rhinos, hopefully at one point all the rhinos of Africa. And this is how, at last, we have 2 sentences of 29 years each happening 2 weeks ago. Because it could be very well documented that the implication of the trader with the poaching, even traces of blood, of rhino blood on the T-shirt could associate the person to the scene of the crime. So there are ways, and the forensics are improving as we speak, and WWF is investing a lot in her work and in training the judiciary on how to utilize the best available evidence for more charges to pile up so that we get effective deterrence. It's all about deterrence, because so far what happens with wildlife crime is it's extremely high profitability and very low risk. And changing that equation is what this work is all about. It has to be high risk. But here's this new thing that Christy ran into. What is it? Conservation drones. That sounds like killing machines. Of course, we don't mean to be killing anything, but we want to be taking photographs, high-resolution video, high-resolution photographs. These drones are absolutely amazing. But this is sadly not enough. Not enough. We're doing the best we can, and we will continue to do this because we need to continue to be in the field enforcing. But we need to do more because political will has been the main bottleneck of why enforcement internationally does not happen at the levels that we need it to happen, and why syndicates have a niche to move freely around and to continue to capitalize on the elephants and on the rhino horn and on the tiger parts without any problem, very low risk. The campaign really addresses wildlife trade because, as I said before, it's a tremendously profitable business. In the order of 7 to 10 billion US dollars are moved around in the world. This is one of the 5 top illegal trafficking activities of the world. Very low risk, and as I said, very much needed in the terms of unblocking the bottleneck to this. It's nowhere a priority. We want to change that by arguing that this is not about the cuddly animals. This is about the human lives that are implicated, either because they are lost. If you're an eco-ranger, you have families. We have the Widows Association of Virunga National Park, of course, about 180 rangers that have lost their lives over the last 15, 20 years or so. It's very serious stuff. It goes beyond the rangers themselves. And this civil unrest that is associated to this, including the illegal trafficking of arms and money laundering, all associated to animal trade, is what we want to emphasize as part of the campaign. This destabilizes society. This is a national security issue in Central African countries, and as such, the level of priority it needs to get is much higher than it has so far. We do several things and strategies. This is the stick. I will show you the carrot a little bit afterwards, and then the spotlight. But the stick came upon Vietnam with our wildlife crime scorecard around the CITES Standing Committee meeting in Geneva in July, where we presented the scorecard with traffic light kind of infographics, and Vietnam got 2 red for tiger and for rhino in terms of compliance and putting in place the measures that CITES requires from them. Of course, Vietnam didn't like that at all. They wrote an angry letter to Jim Leap complaining about WWF, and that's exactly what we needed. We wanted them to come out and tell us what they believe they have been doing. So now with this letter, they are saying we are trying to do this, trying to do that, basically acknowledging that they do have a situation. And what the letter generated was a dialogue with them, and now they had meetings with our WWF staff, senior staff from international, went there and so forth. And we are talking about ways of collaborating. Rather than being kicked out of Vietnam, which some people feared, this is the end for WWF, they will kick out. There is a door that is now open and is having a more frank conversation than before. The stick. The carrot was to President Ali Bongo in Gabon in terms of, if you go ahead with burning all your stockpiles of ivory, we will make sure you get international press and visibility to the extent that you want. Of course, as part of the Gabonese green agenda of promoting Gabon as an ecotourist destination, this was just perfect for Ali Bongo's government. And that's what he did. And he did also some very exciting announcements during the burn. That he will put in place a unit of 250 paramilitary trained anti-poaching guards that will serve the different national parks. That has already happened. And that he will review the legislation so that wildlife crime becomes a serious crime rather than just a small little something that you get away with a fine. So 2 things that actually result in on-the-ground conservation to the benefit of elephants. And then we have the spotlight, and the spotlight was thrown on Cameroon during the big slaughter of about 300 elephants in Boubanjida in March this year. You may have seen this in the news. It was there everywhere. So it was putting them on the spotlight that actually triggered the sending out of the elite troop to the north, a little bit too late, as I said, but phone calls by various ambassadors and by the EU representative to the president were instrumental in this, and WWF made some of those connections and triggered some of those communications. So that's the way it works. Eventually, the president of Cameroon made some announcements. They will step up the investment in eco-rangers, and they have now 2,500 more eco-rangers. 60 have already been deployed in Boubanjida, additional to that. They have created the National Authority of National Parks, which did not exist, and so forth. So this actually triggers stuff. So to bring it to the highest level, percolates into systemic changes that are to the benefit not just of elephants, great apes, but also of anything else. So Just a quick summary of what the campaign seeks to do. The campaign was launched in early August, and it will run for a year. In Central Africa, of course, a strengthened platform for law enforcement and prosecutions. Working with Thailand, because they will host the next conference of the parties of CITES in March next year. And as a host country, they can't afford to have this rampant sale of illegal ivory in their country. So it's a perfect political opportunity for them to shine and present that they've cleaned their act. Clean their act is not just to remove the ivory from the shelves, and then it will be back 2 weeks after the COP, but to make changes in the legislation and in the enforcement capacity. So that's what's happening there. In Vietnam, of course, we would like to see the government deploy an awareness campaign to tell people, stop selling your house and your car and going bankrupt because you want to buy this medicine that doesn't help for cancer. In China, again, with the Chinese government, a big deployment of demand reduction efforts is what we need. Lastly then, does this all pay off? All these efforts from local to global, policy, field, everything we do. It does, it does. And this is just an example with Greater One-Horned Rhino where we are today, where we were 1985 in Kaziranga alone, which is this park in Assam that I told you, now close to 2,300 rhinos. And the 2020 target of the Asian Rhino Program for this species is to reach 4,000. And that is likely to happen. We are on the right track, but we just can't let the poaching take over. So that's why we have to be there. We have to continue to be there. The species are conservation dependent. But if we do good conservation, we get good results. Thank you.